Hi, I'm Riz Khan in London. In this episode of my show, I've spanned the Atlantic to hear two different perspectives on the conflict in Gaza. Aviv Ezra is Israel's acting consul general in New York, the largest Israeli consulate in the US. And Husam Zomlot is the head of the Palestinian mission to the UK, here in London. Our conversations were broad in their scope, addressing claims of genocide, hostages, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the position of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, relations with the US, and prospects for peace and a lasting settlement. Both men expressed strong and opposing views, but did so through conversation rather than a shouting match. And that's the intent of my show, to equip you, our viewers and listeners, with information from which you can make your own conclusions. We'll start in the UK with Ambassador Zomlot. Ambassador, thank you for your time. Do you see any light on the horizon for Gaza, or are you expecting the Israeli military action to continue for notably longer?
Israel wants to, and many commentators are saying they don't understand what is the exact Israeli aim, goal, and I think the Israelis have a goal, and the goal has been executed, unfortunately, which is the complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Look what is happening. They have completely destroyed 70% of the Gaza housing stock. They have destroyed all of our infrastructure, the civil infrastructure. They have destroyed 370 schools, all of Gaza's universities, most of Gaza's hospitals. This is a very well crafted, implemented, executed plan. A plan to make Gaza lifeless, unlivable, and to push people, displace people to the south, waiting for a moment for that mass expulsion they have done 75 years ago, the Nakba. Israel has a plan, and the world is watching, and everybody is wondering what they're doing. They're doing what they want to do.
When you ask Israeli representatives, their answer is that their goal is to defeat Hamas totally, and also to get the release of their hostages, the Israelis held there. The situation is becoming a little more complicated as Hezbollah and Houthi rebels in Yemen seem to be mobilizing more in apparent solidarity with the situation of the Palestinians in Gaza. What danger is there, in your opinion, of this spreading to a much wider regional conflict?
It's a huge danger, and it's happening. Again, Netanyahu and the government of Israel is dragging the whole region. They are trying to, and provoking the situation in the West Bank, as we just said. They are provoking the Lebanese side, and you are following the bombardment. The Syrian side, you are following the Israeli bombardment. Now Iraq is engaged. Now Yemen is engaged. So this is becoming regional. And the key constant factor between all those in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the region, is Netanyahu's insistence to drag the West into his immoral wars, so he stays in government, and so he is the one who is waging a war. His calculation is, so long as the war continues, so long as the war grows, he will continue being the prime minister. And this man has become the most dangerous human being on earth on global peace and security.
I'll get on to Benjamin Netanyahu in a moment, but deep down, what was your reaction when you heard what happened on the 7th of October last year in Israel?
Deep down, I thought that, Israel is going to instrumentalize that moment to finish off what they started in 1948. Deep down, the only thing that I was fearing is a second Nakba. Deep down, I thought that given what Israel is capable of, and given how its backers, including the US and the UK and the West, are going to behave, I thought that would be a moment for Israel to actually do what it does. And unfortunately, a big part of my fear, of my nightmare, has been unfolding in front of my own eyes and in front of my own family's eyes. And actually, big part of my own family has been killed since the 7th of October. I think from my own extended family, more than 100, and because of the cut in the communications, we don't even have a final number. Most of their houses have been destroyed, and therefore, that is the moment. However, we have been saying very clearly, that Israel has no right to self-defense so far as it is an occupation. Occupiers do not have the right to self-defense. Occupiers oppress. The only party that has a right to self-defense is the occupied, the colonized, the besieged. That's us. And therefore, all act of aggression starts with the occupation. The state of occupation is an act of aggression in itself. We are not confused there. And we reject all the media attempts and the global attempts that you may have followed to frame us and put us in a certain direction. We are the victims here. Also, the Palestinian people have been at it for a long time. This is a people's struggle that has lasted for 100 years. for liberation, for freedom, for dignity, for a state of our own, and therefore we don't want to have a history started on the 7th of October, nor we want history to end there. It's part of that long journey, and the key aspect of that moment is that no one can bypass the Palestinian issue. That's a key aspect. The second key aspect is you must resolve this, not manage it.
Did you have any clue about October the 7th, or could you have conceived that Palestinians could take such extreme action in Israel in such a way?
No, I didn't.
You described the extent to which Gaza has been destroyed in terms of infrastructure, and of course we know there's a huge death toll. Could Gaza ever be the same again?
Yes, and Gaza is so resilient, and Palestine is so resilient, and you know, we will recover. We will recover and we will rise. This is not the first time. This is not the first time, but you have a very exceptional situation of people that have gone through so many traumas and have developed together a sense of togetherness and a sense of unity and a sense of survivability. And we are equipped with roots and history and traditions and norms and sense of solidarity together that allow us to come back and to thrive. And you know, we use this example, you know, Jesus Christ was born in Palestine, so we have an experience with resurrection ourselves. So Gaza will resurrect, Palestine will resurrect.
What about the generations of children and young people now who've witnessed what they've seen in Gaza, and of course Palestinians outside the area who also have witnessed it close, up hand with families and so on? What's going to happen to their mindset, their ideology now going forward? Could they actually think of a peaceful situation?
The biggest trauma a child could ever go through is what is happening to the Palestinian children. Remember the UN Secretary General first statement that Gaza has become a graveyard for children, and this is very accurate. More than 10,000 Palestinian children have been slaughtered in Gaza only in the last 3 months. This is the highest number of children in any conflict, the highest number of journalists in any conflict since record began, the highest number of doctors and medical staff, the highest number of aid workers, UN workers. What is happening cannot be described by words. However, you know, I am the son of the first Nakba because my parents were the ones who were ethnically cleansed. And my parents have really managed to insulate me and my generation and really bring the best out of us. Play on the love, not the hate. And they invested so heavily, whatever left of them, because Israel kicked them out of their homes and farms and properties. They had very little, but that very little was invested in our education, in our ability to understand who we are. And look at me, I was born in a refugee camp to the very south of Gaza, by the way, in Rafah, called Shabura refugee camp. I believe the current parents in Gaza and in Palestine will do the same with the new generation. We will teach our children love to their people and to their culture and to their history, and love to their future. And we will make sure that trauma will not get to them.
But they would also have to teach them to live with the Israelis in peace.
Yes, well, we have to teach them to live in dignity. And if that dignity means that Israel has quitted its occupation and ended its occupation, colonization, besiegement, apartheid imposed on our people, on our children, if they have an equal life like everybody else, they will live in peace. But if they don't, they shall be also part of our long history of resistance and struggle. This is a legitimate struggle, but struggle not based on hate, struggle based on love. The love of who we are and the love for what we must be. And therefore, I think what the previous generations have done will happen again, because many people are asking the question, what will happen to these children? How they will grow up? They will grow up protected. This is a society, the Palestinian society is capable to embrace their generations. I was embraced by a generation that lost everything, and I believe the next generation will be embraced and protected.
Now, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been for so long seen as a kind of bulletproof politician. He has survived at the top of Israeli politics for so long, but now people are talking about cracks in his own system and that Israelis themselves don't see a future with him. What would Israel be like without Netanyahu, in your opinion?
Not much different. Because to really reduce the whole thing into a Netanyahu is to reduce our history into a one person. We have structural issues with Israel. The Israeli public has been shifting right and right-wing and more right-extreme, and look at the last government. And in the last so many years, the Israeli public has managed to decouple the issues that has to do with the Palestinians, as if we don't exist, as if we are the biggest elephant in the room. They know we exist. They know they are oppressing us. They know their military occupation and colonial expansion and besiegement and apartheid, but yet it doesn't exist. Remember the hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking off to the streets just prior to the 7th of October, protesting Netanyahu. You had a huge amount of, over a long period of time, of people in Israel protesting Netanyahu. None of them made the link with the occupation. When in fact, what Netanyahu was doing in that so-called judicial reform, he was trying to solidify the settlement movement, because the Ben Gvir and Smotrich are representatives of the settlement movement. And in effect, many people were saying in the last few years that Israel is going to annex the settlements. In effect, what has happened, it's the settlements, the illegal colonial settlements in the occupied territory, that has annexed Israel. It's not Israel that annexed the settlement, it's the settlement that was about to annex Israel. Yet the Israeli public has not made the link. Complete isolation of the illegalities and the brutalities and the atrocities that are committed by their government. So there is a lot of work to be done to change that. This is not gonna change because you have a new guy in the Israeli, cabinet or a prime minister. You have got to change the dynamics in which the Israeli public realizes that they cannot keep at it. They cannot go on. They cannot have the cake and eat it too.
Now, I know you believe that the media, to a large degree, is responsible for much of the anti-Palestinian rhetoric. You say it has defiled the Palestinian cause, desecrated the Palestinian struggle, and essentially legitimized Israel's actions. Why do you feel the media has this agenda?
Well, it's a very long experience with mainstream Western media, particularly. They have for a long time, decades, put us in the wrong framework. We were always put in the framework of violence and terrorism, when in fact violence and terrorism has been exercised against us from the beginning. We lost 2/3 of our nation in 1948 when the UK was still in a state of control of Palestine, when Britain, colonial Britain. So violence has been exercised and terrorism against us. And in that framework, they always want to blame you. So the start of the conversation, do you condemn yourself? When in fact, the atrocities that have been committed by Israel all these years, Israeli officials, ambassadors, have never asked that question. Why? Why? We pause here. Why? When Israel has killed just the last 3 months, more than 30,000 Palestinians, 70% of whom are children and women. You know why? Because some of the mainstream media does really consider Palestinian lives not to matter the same. Once they put you in that whole framework, then it is a dispute between almost two equal parties. So you've done a mistake, they've done a mistake. Israel might be disproportionate, but in the end, the Palestinians are the aggressors, not Israel. I mean, this is a twist of the whole facts upside down. And I could go on. Look at your colleagues in the Western media. They strip the whole thing of context. As if history began on the 7th of October. History began 106 years ago here in this capital, in this city. The Balfour Declaration that stripped us, our peoplehood and our statehood, and turned us into a non-Jewish minorities. So history is long, and media is guilty of always playing sensational and primarily following the cue from the Israeli narrative.
But now the media is seeing what's happening in Gaza over such a period of time. It feels, to a lot of people, it feels like there's a turning point. Do you think this is a chance for rehumanizing Palestinians, since so many people say they've been dehumanized? It is.
And I see the turning point, and I see the change, especially in the last few weeks and months. You're right. And I see the change in the approach, and I see the change in the tone. But it's not enough. We still have many challenges and many hurdles to go. We still hear things that are completely dehumanizing the Palestinian people. When I am invited to studios, it's primarily when Israelis are harmed. But when Palestinians are harmed in big numbers, they never call us for interviews. So you see the anti-Palestinian racism sometimes. Why? Our blood is not of the same value? Why? We are children of a lesser God, but the change is happening. The public opinion is changing. Social media is helping. The information is being portrayed. And I think social media is a main reason why mainstream media is now having to adapt itself to the truth, because it has been exposed, particularly in the first few days and weeks of Israel's aggression. I mean, headlines, 40 Israeli babies beheaded. Headlines in the Times here and all these newspapers. Headlines and questioning all Palestinian representatives about many incidents that have proven to be just lies. And look, compare in the Western media when you have an Israeli official or spokesperson and a Palestinian. There it's an interview and a conversation. Here it's interrogation with Palestinians. They interrogate us rather than they want to really listen. I'm not generalizing. Things are changing. There are many Western journalists who are really noble, true to their mission, which is the truth. That's the mission of journalism, portraying, reflecting the truth. There are many of those, and I think they are becoming even more and more.
Well, of course, that's why I think this is important. We have a conversation rather than an argument.
Yes.
Because I do want to get everyone's perspective on this. Now, many people have been asking, though, why is it so hard in the USA, the UK, in the West in general, perhaps, to challenge Israel? What makes it so hard to challenge Israel's policies and the actions it takes? What's your take on that?
Israel has managed to mix and conflate three things together. First is what is Jewish, with what is Zionist, and with what is Israeli. So if you criticize Israeli policies, you will be immediately anti-Semitic. So this conflation have caused a great deal of stifling the debate and scaring everybody to engage in a conversation about Israel's policy, not Israel's identity. It is not the identity of our oppressors that is at stake here. It is the fact of our oppression. So it's ridiculous to assume, Riz, that had our oppressors not being Jewish, we would have been okay with it. If our oppressors were Scottish or our oppressors would have been from anywhere else, we would have been okay. But only because they're Jewish. No, because they are occupiers, because they are colonizers, because they are besiegers, regardless of their faith, regardless of their identity and what have you. I'm telling you all this conversation because the West has turned Israel into the most toxic issue to discuss. And that's how you have politicians here in the UK who want to ban demonstrations, ban the Palestinian flag, calling these millions of people the marches of hate, remember? And then you have the push by the people. So the West has been unable to deal with Israel in an ordinary, normal way, equal to all other states.
I know you also believe that the US has now lost its role as the main mediator, that it's lost that monopoly it had on the peace process, as you put it. So what sort of window does this create for other nations to come in and play a role? And which nations would you believe might be, well, in your opinion, more fair player?
Well, to be very practical, we will always need the US. The question is, how do you need the US? And to have the US to be the sole arbitrator, the sole mediator, is a model that has been tried for more than 30 years, and it has failed. This model has to end. We need everybody. South Africa has a role. Africa has a role. Asia has a role. The world has a role. And there are many countries who are way more committed to the principles of international law. And what South Africa did was such an example of a responsible state that takes international law seriously.
So South Africa did go to the International Court of Justice, ICJ, to challenge what Israel is doing. The verdict was kind of a soft slap on the wrist for Israel. What was your take on what actually happened?
It was much more than a slap. This is very serious. Nothing is worse than being accused of genocide. That's the epitome of crimes. That's the mother of all crimes.
Israel wasn't accused of genocide. It said you were just told not to engage in genocide. Isn't that correct?
No. What the court was clear about is that there are two tracks here. There is the provisional measures whereby they have ordered Israel to stop killing Palestinians, to stop preventing aid and humanitarian assistance from arriving, to stop tampering with evidence of genocide, to stop, and all the list, and to report back to the court in 1 month. That's the first part. So the first part is effectively ceasefire. You have to stop. But the second part is that the court has ruled that the case against Israel of genocide is plausible, and therefore the court have officially accepted that Israel is now on trial for genocide. This is not a slap on the wrist. This is the first and the most significant attempt at accountability.
The UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, is going through a very difficult time now, ever since Israel released information that 12 of the UNRWA members were involved in the 7th of October attacks on Israel. As a result, a lot of the top donors to UNRWA have actually withdrawn their funding, despite the fact the UN Secretary General asked them to keep supporting UNRWA. US, Canada, UK, all have pulled out the funding. What's that going to do to Palestinians who are probably more dependent than ever on the UNRWA Relief Agency work?
There couldn't be anything worse than that very counterproductive decision by a few countries, Western countries, to suspend funding to UNRWA at this point in time. UNRWA is a lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees. So for some governments to suspend based on allegations of few individuals, and still the UN is investigating these allegations, and engage in collective punishment of an organization that is a UN organization that has 30,000 employees because of a handful. They're talking about in effect 10 of them, is really beyond any comprehension. This is not policy, this is revenge. And it's also in light of Israel's insistence and work for years to demolish this organization, because some Israeli officials claim that UNRWA perpetuates the right of return. Well, UNRWA does not perpetuate the right of return. And let me say something, yani, I was educated by UNRWA.
I was going to say, you were actually born in an UNRWA-run camp, yeah.
I was educated by UNRWA, provided for by UNRWA. UNRWA gave Palestinian children and gave Palestinian people a very good path to life and to the future. So cutting that is actually playing in the hands of extremism, playing in the hands of the unknown for the future, playing in the hands of your question earlier, what will happen to these children. This is a very ill-advised decision, and I call through your program for these governments to immediately reconsider such a decision.
Ambassador, I also know you don't like the idea of a two-state solution. Explain that logic.
Because it gives the impression that there are no states and then we need to create two states. There is already a state existing, that is Israel, and that state is occupying another state that is existing but in the UN and in the recognition of the international community and in our rights. So it's a situation of ending occupation of one state to the other state. That's the actual conversation, and also it gives the image of some sort of parity and some sort of symmetry. The two-state solution. Another term, a process. I mean, this has become really a term that no Palestinian like, because it means the buying of time and the throwing of the can down the road. And the
as in peace process.
Yeah, peace processes. It has become more about the process than it is about peace. So the two-state solution misses the point that there is an occupier and an occupied.
So what is the alternative?
Ending occupation. That's the term.
What sort of state do you see for the Palestinian people then?
You will see a very prosperous state, and you will see a state that will be able to provide for its people and also be a bridge between East and West, as once we were. You have a special society, one of the most educated in the world. You know very well, Riz, wherever Palestinians go, they help build other countries. I think, you know, wherever I go, I meet Palestinian genius professors here in the UK, in the US when I was ambassador. You will be amazed. You will be amazed the level of professionalism, education. You know, Palestine has one of the highest PhD per capita graduates worldwide. Some 20 years ago, I think it was the highest in per capita basis. This is a nation that is capable to govern itself. This is a nation that is capable to build itself. And this is a nation that is capable to develop a state that is that is a source of stability and a source of security.
At a personal level, for someone like you, born in a refugee camp, knowing nothing but Israeli occupation and the lifestyle that the people have had to go through, could you live in peace with Israel?
Yes, of course. The problem is not can I live in peace with Israel. What I can tell you, I cannot live with Israel's occupation. I cannot live with Israel's colonization. I cannot live with Israel's racism. I cannot live with Israel's supremacy. I cannot live with this sheer hatred and dehumanization. They don't see us as equal human beings. The first day of peace is the first day of the end of occupation. That's why let's not talk about two-state solution. Let's talk about ending the oppression and ending the occupation. And then, you know, there will be a state, naturally, a Palestinian state, sovereign. That state will engage with Israel. Then negotiations began. Not before. You don't negotiate your freedom out of occupation. You don't negotiate your equal rights out of occupation. You don't. You snatch your rights. You acquire your rights via international support and via Israeli acceptance that they have to end their oppression. Once that happens, then you negotiate, and then you talk about two processes, and you talk about, you know, dialogue and all that. Dialogue to decide the nature of the relationship between the two states, but not the nature of the state.
Now, in terms of self-determination, critics of the Palestinian leadership say it hasn't done a lot in the last couple of decades for the Palestinian people. How do you answer those critics? Of course, there's the huge division between Fatah and Hamas, and that criticism of Fatah was considered to be one of the factors that brought Hamas to power in Gaza anyway.
It's very legitimate. Criticisms are legitimate by the Palestinian people, and it's their right to assess and to review what has happened.
What do you feel about that?
I think the Palestinian people are united as a people. And look, throughout our history,
what about the leadership?
there is no division among the people because we have one identity, we have one goal, and we have one oppressor. Remember, Israeli bullets does not distinguish between Fatah and Hamas, does not distinguish between Gaza and the West Bank. So it's also, we are united by our oppressor and we are united by our national goal. We have also national institutions. Not one Palestinian challenges the legitimacy of the PLO. Every Palestinian realizes and calls for and accepts that the PLO is the umbrella, is the address, the Palestinian national and political address for the Palestinian people. But many Palestinians want to see a reformed PLO. That's a different conversation. It's not about the idea of a PLO, the institution of the PLO, the structure of the PLO. It's about, renewal and elections and all that.
There's also all the criticism that a lot of the money, the leadership has billions, that a lot of the money gets siphoned off. Those have to be addressed as well.
Well, there is the perception and there is the reality, and corruption is a plague, and it's plaguing everybody, and we must make sure that we are zero tolerant with corruption, because a nation seeking liberation should be absolutely white in terms of that. But who's perfect? I mean, Netanyahu himself is about to go to court for that. The issue is, do you have legitimate institutions? Fatah and Hamas is a different matter. Fatah and Hamas are political parties, movements, and Fatah is the founder of the Palestine National Movement and the pillar of the PLO. And I believe the PLO doors are open for Hamas and all other political parties to be part of the Palestinian legitimacy based on the Palestinian legitimate commitments and political program.
I understand it's not in your interest to highlight any divisions, of course, because it's the unity you want to promote. But could there be any peaceful resolution now, considering what's happened between Israel and Hamas as such, if Hamas continues to exist?
You think Hamas will not continue to exist? I mean, Hamas is not just its military wing. Hamas is also an idea. And can you bomb ideas out of existence? I mean, this whole Israeli talk and some of their backers is really non-policy. It's apolitical and apolicy. So Hamas is part and parcel of the Palestinian national, political, and social fabric. That's a fact. We did not import them from somewhere. They are us. They are part of us. We disagree with them. And they are not part of our political system. And one day they will have to be part of the political system based on a consensus and agreement among Palestinians. A way to agree how do we disagree. But we have to agree on how, on the ship, the national ship, the sailing destination, the final destination, the liberation, and who's the captain. And we have to accept that there is no one party that takes the Palestinian people to either peace or war alone.
Ambassador, considering what's happened in the past 4 months or so, being realistic, what sort of future do you think Palestinians can expect in the next few years? Do you expect any real change?
I think there will be a change. And I think the change has already started, and started a few years back. And look what has happened. And now I think the movement that is being built up in the world is real movement. And I participate in many of these demos. I speak in these big demos, massive marches. It's of all colors, all religions. It's such a sense of unity. You know what, Riz? I even feel sometimes of late, families come, mothers and babies, in a festive mood. They are not only supporting Palestine, they are celebrating their humanity. Really, that's what I see. And I interact with them. They are celebrating who they are. They are celebrating that here we are principled. We are against the Israeli actions. We are against the Israeli war. We are with the Palestinian rights. I think this has the making of a movement, global movement, millions, masses, that would do exactly as they did with South Africa. The anti-apartheid movement will go all the way to suck oxygen out of the occupation, out of the settlements, out of the colonization, to make sure that all this will collapse as did apartheid South Africa, and make sure that our prisoners will be released and the state of Palestine will be freed, and the future will be absolutely shaped by the very, very universal values that connect a British to a Palestinian, to a Pakistani, to a South African. And I think this is a moment when the people of the world are saying enough. We are going to protect our values. This is not the values of few politicians. We will protect our system. We will support the ICJ. I am hopeful that this is a turning moment and I am aware how much work that needs to be done, but I am also aware of the opportunity.
Ambassador Husam Zomlot, thank you so much.